At the same time, also to highlight the importance of the partnerships that's required to make the success and to meet the need. Now, it's my great honor and pleasure to invite the Vice President of the Korean Environment Institute, Dr. Woo Jin Han, to deliver her the closing remarks. Dr. Han.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Babu. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished participants. It is my great honor to make a closing remark at this important forum. First of all, I would like to extend my appreciation to Dr. Young-woo Park, Mr. Keith Albertson, Mr. Hideyuki Mori, Dr. Jonathan Searle, and Dr. Johan Quillen-Stilla for allowing us this opportunity to host the third Asia-Pacific Climate Change Adaptation Forum here in Incheon. I must not forget to convey my special thanks to all those who have put their efforts into this forum. Also, I would like to thank my colleagues in KEI for organizing this event. As you know, this forum has attracted a large number of participants, over 500 from 60 countries. Also, I would like to thank all the participants for joining this discussion and providing with valuable inputs, which has made the forum more fruitful than I expected. Distinguished guests, for 3 days, we have explored adaptation strategies and actions that are adopted in various countries, organizations, and communities. This allowed us to have a better understanding of climate change adaptation in multifaceted ways. Many success stories as well as failures we have heard of gave us meaningful lessons for successful adaptation. What is abundantly clear is that integrating adaptation to climate change into planning processes is necessary for sustainable development, both in national and local level. As the host country of the forum, I hope that Korea's experience on mainstreaming climate change adaptation, which was shared in the Plenary 4 on day 2, be of any help to you and to the global society. Again, great thanks to those who contributed in the discussion on how we can continually improve our strategies into the future. As we discussed today, it is an issue that critical but neglected groups to be involved in adaptation planning so as to maximize synergy effects of our actions. In this regard, a comprehensive engagement of diverse stakeholders should be accorded great consideration. Considering that climate change will impact all countries to some extent, it is no wonder that there is a great demand for knowledge sharing and management for adaptation. In this regard, I would encourage active follow-up to this forum, as this forum would be an effective tool for promoting ingenious adaptation strategies and actions and sharing experiences. In the last few decades, climate change has become one of the biggest challenges to the human race. Unless we mainstream climate change adaptation in development plans, increasing vulnerability to climate change will make our sustainable future look fairly dim. I call on everybody to take back the lessons and the experience drawn from this forum with you and continue to face the challenges and overcome the barriers. In closing, I would like to thank you all once again and wish you all a safe journey back home. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Han, for your closing remarks, particularly highlighting the importance of the integration at the different level, as well as the importance of the knowledge sharing and the knowledge management. With that, may I invite Dr. Reddick to deliver his closing remarks. Dr. Eddy.
Thank you very much. Let me get this started. So, after this stimulating forum, in my closing remarks, I'm going to indulge in a bit of speculation, and I hope that you will forgive me, as it was your presentations and your comments that prompted it. We've been told to think in 100-year time spans, and Louis Lebel cautions us not to rely on the past as a guide to the future. I want to explore that a bit. My starting point is Salim's distinction between the rich and the stupid, and as opposed to the poor and the smart. It is possible that this is due to deep cultural roots or genetic factors, but I suspect that it is a special form of stupidity that is a byproduct of development. Specifically, I suspect that it is at least in part a byproduct of spreading risk across society. A stronger society-wide response weakens a capacity for local response. If risks are known, this isn't a problem. It's possible to anticipate the likelihood of different outcomes, and it is possible to design infrastructure, private insurance, and public disaster relief and response to match the known set of risks. With adaptation to climate change, we face not a known set of risks, but highly uncertain events that may have substantial negative impacts. In the face of this, we often plan by analogy. We look at similar extreme events from the past, or we look at extreme events for the past either in the same or a similar location and design against those. But it is possible, and I would argue increasingly possible, that future climate change will be truly unprecedented. One important category of this is abrupt climate change, extreme changes such as a fundamental change in the monsoon or the loss of the Greenland ice sheet that could introduce challenges on a scale we have not experienced. But I will suggest the possibility of another factor that is unprecedented for planners planning for a variable climate, but not unprecedented in the world, and I'm going to draw on an analogy outside of the climate, the so-called subprime crisis that triggered the recent global recession. Subprime loans are very risky, but nearly all investors assumed that the risk could be spread. They assumed that risky loans would fail randomly and independently. A handful of investors bet that the entire subprime market would collapse all at once, and they became very rich. Extreme climate events that currently are 30-year events may become 10-year or 5-year events in the future under a changed climate. Not only does that mean that such events will be more frequent, it also increases the chance that different extremes will happen at once. They'll coincide, not just a 30-year flood or a 30-year heat wave, but both a flood and a heat wave that individually would stress our current systems and together could be catastrophic. Spreading risk is a great benefit of a complex society, but we should not assume that we may continue to do this as we have in the past. So it can continue, but not as we have in the past. And remember Louis Lebel's point that sustainable development is not, unsustainable development, is not a solution to adaptation. So this suggests, to me at least, that the organization of complex society, something that I have not heard people questioning here, may have to fundamentally change. That's a tentative conclusion from a bit of speculation that flowed from this forum, for me at least. I think that I looked at the forum and I saw the presentations that to me were communicating great possibilities, very creative thinking, real options for the future, but it did make me start to wonder, what are we missing that could be a complete surprise? And I invite us all to think about that so that we can be prepared for an increasingly uncertain future. And thank you again for a very stimulating forum.
Thank you, Eric, for sharing your views, and I'm sure this will help us to design the future as well. With that note, it's my pleasure to invite the President of Institute for the Global Environmental Studies, known as IJS, Dr. Hyodoki Mori. Mori-san, floor is for you.
Thank you very much. This is a very great meeting, and first I'd like to thank all the participants for making this forum very useful and interesting. And also I'd like to thank KEI and other co-organizers for supporting this event. I myself has fully enjoyed stimulating discussions and have met all the friends and created new networks. And perhaps all of you must have done the same. So that's the very important value for this forum. We are here to talk about adaptation, basically how to develop resilient societies. In this respect, in Japan, after the very serious earthquake, tsunami, and the nuclear power plant, we have been making a lot of effort to make Japan, in particular affected areas, more resilient than before. And therefore, the lessons we have learned there, or we are learning there, can have quite relevant information to be shared here. So I'd like to just briefly share with you some important lessons. Perhaps we are learning from that very big disaster that took place almost 2 years ago. The first point I'd like to emphasize is the fact that no perfect prevention and preparation is possible. No, whichever preparedness or prevention measures have been taken, we cannot erase all disasters. So some loss and damage is inevitable. And therefore, the point we'd like to stress is to come up with some kind of mechanisms in which to minimize the damage done by big disasters. This is the most important lesson we have learned. As you know very well, Japan has spent so much money, so much investment to make Japan as resistant to any sort of natural disaster as possible. But nevertheless, we had this big disaster. Then, next point I'd like to emphasize is the importance of local governance. In this rehabilitation process or recovery process, decisions need to be taken locally simply because situations are different from locality to another. And the central government role is to support such local decisions. This is very well accepted principle and easy to say, but actually difficult to be done. And I think we are still struggling with that. And therefore, in a sense, this local governance is quite essential, but it is not simple, and actually it is very complicated. Let me give you one example about that, the kind of challenge we have. After, for example, this tsunami and nuclear power accident in Fukushima, still hundreds of thousands of people in that area are, in a sense, internally replaced, and they cannot go back to their homes. And then already 2 years have passed, and some of them found their places in other areas, urban areas and others, mainly young ones. But older ones would like to stay in their hometowns as close as possible. But some groups of people, like women, in particular with small children, would like to stay away, contaminated areas, as far away as possible. That makes, for example, some families separated. And therefore, all kinds of difficulties we are still facing. And how to help these people in different situations is the kind of, I think, challenge we have. And it's very complicated, and it's going to be a very lengthy process. This may be something very much related to what we are discussing here. And the next point I'd like to mention is the centralized system, like the system we had in providing electricity is very vulnerable, more vulnerable to localized systems. After the nuclear power plant in Fukushima, in Tokyo area, we had blackout, shortage of electricity, so we had some hard time. But this system if this system was supplemented by localized electricity supply system, then perhaps a recovery could have been much quicker and easier. And therefore, we should think more about localized system, which would be much stronger to disasters. But after disaster, how we develop that kind of infrastructure is still a challenge. So these are some of the lessons perhaps we could share with you. And same kind of experiences, I'm sure, is being experienced in a number of Asian countries, because Asia is the area which is most vulnerable to natural disasters. And if this forum is going to be a kind of gathering to share this kind of information amongst the scientists, policymakers, and the stakeholders, I think that would be great. And this is the basis for Asian, all of us in Asia to send our messages to the world. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Morrison, for reflecting experience of Japan, particularly